So the greatest thing about the city of Pompeii for us today is the notion of really, I think, understanding more so than any other time period we've looked at, the kind of day-to-day lives of ordinary everyday people, as well as the elite and the wealthy, that their domiciles, their homes were preserved as part of this. And we haven't really had the opportunity to think about how an ordinary everyday person would have lived in the ancient world up to yet. So the typical Italian home today is still based on the precedent of what the Romans constructed thousands and thousands of years ago. And we have to keep in mind the climate of Italy, the Mediterranean climate, allows for a little bit of a different arrangement of different qualities of the home. So although some of these aren't on your study guide, I'm still going to walk you through the primary elements of a Roman villa or home. And this diagram is related to a home that is known as the House of the Silver Wedding. So we're going to look at that a little bit more. So first things first, on the exterior walls of a villa, you would find very little openings for windows or doors. Why might you think there would be very little openings for windows or doors? Or why would we put very few windows on the exterior of our home? It's hot. Anything else?
Right by the ocean, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of weather that's going to make it kind of ruin things.
Maybe the weather? I'm going to just make it simple to keep out bad smells and sounds. That it gives a little bit more of a sense of privacy to not have exterior windows. So there's going to be very few of those. You would enter in through the home, typically through what's known as a vestibule, and then to either side of the vestibule would be rooms, usually where the family would conduct their family business. So that's where they'd meet clients and so forth. And usually clients would wait in the area known as the atrium. One thing you'll note if we look at the reconstruction up above is that there are actually holes in the ceiling or in the roof line, so that this is actually kind of like open air. So the availability of fresh air and so forth, rather than coming through windows, is coming through either the opening in the atrium or the peristyle courtyard. Keep in mind that peristyle just means a single row of columns would be around all four sides of that courtyard. So you could sort of have the outdoors, your backyard, in your own home. And it would provide a great sense of privacy as well. Cubicula, can you think of a word that sounds like cubicula? Cubicle, right? It just means cube-spaced room, but these would usually be used for bedrooms and other purposes. We would then pass through a kind of open area here into the courtyard, and then we have dining rooms. And the dining room is going to be a very important cultural space for our Roman families. That's where most entertaining will take place. And usually the dining room is somewhat open to the peristyle courtyard as well. So this is kind of your typical layout. This is a fairly simple home compared to some of the others. This is a photograph of that actual space. So we're standing in the atrium. You'll note there's a pool, and this pool would collect fresh rainwater. Many of these homes were connected to the aqueducts that would provide fresh water to the homes, but some families weren't wealthy enough to have that pipeline constructed. So this would be a source of water for bathing and drinking. And of course, being along salt water, that water would be very clean and fresh versus what's close by. So we cross over through this area here, and I think this is the glory of Roman homes. In the House of the Veti, we have the courtyard. What's really cool about this particular courtyard, which again is in the House of the Veti, we not only see the columns that are the peristyle columns, but we also have archaeologists who specialize in plants. And they were able to determine what seeds were present when the volcano erupted, and they've actually replanted these gardens to have the actual flowers, herbs, and fruit trees that were originally there. So this is sort of what it may have actually looked like. We have other areas for gathering water, a place for art to be present, not just sculpture, but the Romans loved using the planes of walls to decorate their homes. So an overall kind of decoration, and we can see a little bit of fresco on the back wall in this photograph. The art of painting is something we haven't really touched on very much in this class, with the exception of the Minoans, in that not much from the ancient world survives. And that's one way that Pompeii gives us a kind of gift, is that we understand a little bit more about their abilities to imply space. So how do we give an illusion of depth? Their ability to imply light. How do we give a sense of highlight and shadow? Are they concerned with proportion and naturalism? And all of those things, I think, are probably really rooted in Greek traditions. But those Greek paintings are lost because they painted on wood panels, as we've examined before. So this is a really, I think, interesting image in that it shows a painter in her workshop. And I like to say her because we tend to think of artists as being males in this period, but we know through written records that there were several female artists as well. So we see her draped in a very fancy toga, looking at what I would think of as a mock-up or a model, and then the painting that she may be beginning to work on is at her feet. Then there's two people in the background. Some interpret these two as her students, so learning the art from a master, which will become the tradition in communicating art skills into the future. But there's one thing we can also consider. Different artists have different talents and have different skills as they are trained and work. So some may be a little bit more talented than others. In both Pompeii and the neighboring town of Herculaneum, which was also buried by volcanic ash, we have found preserved on the walls of homes portraits. And it's sort of similar to the idea of the sculptures we've looked at, that it's a way to record your ancestors, your family members, and it's a way to also communicate verism, that idea of truth-telling in images. So this is a portrait of what we believe is a newlywed couple. And it's kind of like a trope that they would recycle the same images or the same symbols from certain moments in life, important moments. So usually in wedding portraits, what you would see is the couple, and then you would see them holding actually implements that would show how intelligent and learned they were, that they are literate individuals. So we see he, right under his chin, is holding a scroll, which would be the ancient version of a book. And then she, on the left, is holding a wax tablet. The wax tablet is something that she would use with a stylus to make a rough draft. So she'd write out her letter or her story in wax by impressing the stylus into that. And then you would get out your very expensive papyrus paper imported from Egypt, and you would transfer your rough draft to your papyrus. So I like that idea that it relates to kind of how we still write today. Once the draft has been transferred, they could then melt the surface of the wax and start all over again. So this is very typical. But think of, again, different talents and skills. If we're looking at the proportions of the facial features on these two individuals, you'll know that the eyes seem a little bit enlarged from reality, that the details of texture have been sort of done very quickly, especially in his beard. It's very gestural. I'm going to show you another version of this type of thing. Again, I think this one maybe shows a different skill of a different artist, that the eyes seem a little bit more naturalistic, a little less enlarged, and the details seem a little bit more, again, realistic. So, going back to specific home examples at Pompeii. This is from a very large house. The house is painted in every room in several different styles of painting. Typical in a Roman villa is going to be what we call a dado. And this dado is going to be this area of the wall that is somewhat separated from the painted area. You know, it looks like marble, but again, it is that phenomenon we've seen before known as scagliola, which is where they take plaster and they coat the wall and then they paint it to look like marble, but in that plaster they've mixed in that ground up marble dust so that at the end of painting it, they can polish it, and then it will have the appearance of marble. So the dado is this sort of bottom area. I like to think of this as being similar to like a chair rail in today's modern homes. And then we get the painted images. In this home, it's as though the clients requested from the painter to make it look as though there are windows open into the neighboring surroundings. So we have these areas here that feature architecture that uses one-point linear perspective. And this is something we haven't really dealt with yet in this class. One-point linear perspective operates on the idea that man-made geometric structures, as they recede into space, the parallel lines that make up that structure will all meet on what is known as the horizon line at a point called the vanishing point. So if this is my building and I'm looking at the front of it, but I want to illustrate the side, what I would do is connect the corners of that rectangle with line to the vanishing point, and then I could establish essentially the illusion of that building receding into space. We know the Greeks mastered this, but we start to see that the Romans did as well. So we have these windows, so to speak, and then we have paintings that feature mythological scenes, primarily dealing with different gods and goddesses. So there's kind of a mixture of the illusion of space outside the house and then more flat areas that become pictures that relate to mythology. I'm going to take you to another house really quickly. This house, I'm sorry, I have a bad photograph of it, but it was the best it could find. It was essentially a mansion for this city. I'm going to show you a floor plan of this house. It is known as the Villa of the Mysteries. And the Villa of Mysteries has to do with some of the frescoes that were discovered on the inside, which are some of the most famous Roman paintings ever rediscovered by modern man. So we're looking at this house, which is very, very complicated versus the reconstruction I showed you. And what we believe happened here was not only did a large, wealthy family reside here, but religious practices took place there. The idea of it being a mystery has to do with we don't really know what those religious practices were. So imagine this. You live in a polytheistic culture where there are multiple gods that you could possibly worship. Who are you going to focus your attention on? Who's going to be the one that you worship more than anyone else? It's probably going to be a very personal decision. The most popular of gods to worship, anyone want to take a guess? You'd think it'd be Zeus or Jupiter, but no, something a little bit more fun. What's that? Yep, you're absolutely right. The wine god, Bacchus or Dionysus. And we believe that the room that is labeled number 2 on this diagram was actually used as an initiation room for people who desired to follow the god Bacchus or Dionysus, the god of wine. And this is based on the frescoes. Again, there is a dado, and what's really interesting is they not only probably used this to initiate people into the cult, but they probably also had big banquets and parties in here. So when you were in this space as a participant, you'd be laying on one of those lovely lounge couches, eating your food, drinking your wine, and your head would be at the level of the illusion of space that opens with this red background. So it kind of integrates that in. This is one of the parts of this room. I'm going to take a couple other slides to show you the entirety of the story. But on this stage, this illusion of a platform that the artist has painted, we see women and boys and men all preparing for a banquet. So here we see a boy, he's got a flute or panpipes that he's playing. There's a woman here carrying food to a table. Note, this woman has her back turned to us, and whenever someone's figure, their back is turned to us, we feel more like we're part of the scene because it's more naturalistic. So we have that there, and I'm going to show you a couple others because this isn't exactly clear. This is a little better. We get over here, this is a satyr. And remember, a satyr is half man, half goat, and they are symbolic of male virility and sexuality. He's playing a lyre. Then we have two young satyrs with goats to further that connection to the half man, half goat. This boy has panpipes, so contributing to the music of the festivities. Finally, we get over to this woman here. Note her foot slightly touches over the edge of the platform the artist has painted to give that illusion that maybe she's coming into our space. So I think it's pretty sophisticated. We believe that this woman here is actually the woman to be initiated. She has on a white dress and a purplish cloth that she seems to be using as part of a sort of dance as she twirls in this corner. I'm going to take you back to the primary scene. Here, you can see her over here dancing. We meet the corner. Here we have another satyr. This satyr is lifting up a wine jug, and a young boy is drinking out of that jug, while another boy holding a shield is also holding an actor's mask over the head of the satyr. And that looks a little creepy if no one explains it to you. So we've got that idea of more festivity here. We believe this is actually Bacchus that is reclining here, partially damaged. He has grape leaves on his head versus laurels, so that would be part of the symbolism. Unfortunately, we're missing a lot here that could probably tell us more. Then we get over to this corner, and what we see is the same girl who had been dancing has now taken off her purple cloak. And there is a winged figure here who's actually holding a whip as though she's about to strike with that whip. We go around the corner and we can see that that initiated girl is now with the cloak around her waist receiving the lashes from that whip while another woman dances over here. So the initiation apparently involved a little bit of pain in being flagellated or whipped into the cult of Bacchus.